My name is Pamela Goodwin. I chair the Clean Water Council. And first of all, thank you so much for coming out on this cold and soon-to-be blustery day. By way of introduction, let me say that if this were a mini-series, we would call it Infrastructure, the musical part 4. The Clean Water Council started down this path really not knowing that we would still be talking about these issues 4 years ago when we decided we would do a public hearing on the issue of climate change and its impacts on water. And I laughed to myself because at that particular hearing, Commissioner, part of the debate was whether or not we were really experiencing climate change or just unusual weather circumstances. And I think that today, certainly after our experience with Sandy, we'd have to all acknowledge that we are experiencing both. And what's fascinating to me about that is that conversation led us the next year into a discussion in a very general sense about our water infrastructure resources in the state of New Jersey and what we needed to do to start bolstering them, which led the next year to a hearing on how could we finance these efforts. And then last year, when we thought we would finally be talking about green infrastructure, which would segue between our discussion on climate change and what we had learned about infrastructure, Hurricane Sandy beset the state of New Jersey, and Commissioner Martin specifically asked us if we couldn't focus our efforts on storm recovery issues. And so in the spring of this past year, we did in fact hold such a hearing. And yet again, we heard more and more about what we need to do to not only develop our infrastructure, but to anticipate the fact that our infrastructure needs to be more resilient than it has ever been in the past. And that then brings us to today's hearing. We come back to the topic at hand, green infrastructure, and we have asked our panelists to focus not simply on the topic of green infrastructure, but to try to integrate all of the things that we've been focused on, which includes how do you finance it, how do you adapt it in a way that makes it economically feasible, and finally, with regard to the issues at hand following the storm, how do you make green infrastructure valuable given the fact that we anticipate, unfortunately, that the storm that we experienced last year may not be the last storm of its nature, and that the impacts, given the way in which we're experiencing rising seas, may not be the only time that we experience such a devastating impact. And with that, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Commissioner Martin. Commissioner Martin has been one of this council's biggest fans. He is somebody who gets infrastructure, gets the importance of infrastructure because it's something he's done not only in this life but in his past life. And I am hoping that he will be able to reveal to you some of the things that the department has learned from Sandy and from just the whole notion of reconstituting our water infrastructure. And with that, Commissioner Martin.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Thank you for thank you to all the other members of the panel today. Sounds like we got a great group of people to go through, some of the best experts to talk about a lot of the key critical things that we're talking about for infrastructure these days. Again, on behalf of the governor, I'm very proud to be here. Clean Water Council is one of those councils who, again, I spend a lot of time with. There's only a few councils or commissions that I spend significant time with. And I say that because of the fact that we've got a lot of work going on at DEP. We're still focusing very heavily on Sandy, but there are several key councils and commission that play an absolutely critical role in our thinking and our policy setting that shape a lot of the input that I need and this department needs and this administration needs on being able to go forward, especially when we start talking about water and clean water overall. So I'm very proud to be here again today, and I thank the council for their work, which has continued to be high quality work and provide us some just incredible insights to the future for infrastructure in the state. In post-Sandy, as we talked about before, the amount of infrastructure that was damaged and what we saw, the vulnerabilities of the infrastructure in the state was significant. We had over 70 water supply systems that were damaged or on emergency power or some combination of both. We saw about 100 wastewater treatment plants that had significant problems, and some of those went completely underwater. You look at PVSC, you look at MCUA's Sayreville plant, those plants went completely underwater. And it showed the vulnerabilities of the state that we need to address this and look at it in the future a different way. Overall, we have about $2.6 billion of damage that we know of that was caused by Superstorm Sandy to the infrastructure of the state, to the water infrastructure of the state. It's a big number. I mean, that's not counting the billions of dollars necessary to bring a lot of our infrastructure up to a certain level and a level that we believe is necessary. As you know, a lot of it's old and failing, and we need to focus on that long term. And again, you've heard me talk about that a lot in the past. We're going to continue to talk about that. Obviously, as I mentioned, the vulnerabilities we had, Superstorm Sandy got this on the radar screen for us as ability to start looking at this in the future in a different way. The vulnerabilities are there, and we need to start addressing those vulnerabilities. As I mentioned, a lot of it's old and failing infrastructure. There's been a lack of funding, primarily on the federal level on this. And again, from a state resources to be able to fund that, it becomes difficult. Though we've been finding a lot of good ways through EIT and other mechanisms to get money out on the street for that infrastructure. But it's got to be some long-term planning that ties back to that overall. Sandy has created some opportunities for us on infrastructure, which is a good part of that. In that we've been able to increase both federal and state funding for rebuilding with more resiliency. We increased the focus on the criticality of that infrastructure, that it's necessary to maintain that long term. We also put in our minds that there's no such thing as a quick fix on infrastructure. It's not like let's go fix it all tomorrow and it'll be done, or put some basic small fixes in place. There are a lot of small fixes that had to be made to make systems operational. But the bottom line is that we've recognized now this is not a let's go sort it out in a year or two, it'll all be done, it'll all be fine. These are long-term challenges that we need to work on. They require long-term investments and a long-term mindset. It's not a quick fix. So there are four key areas that I want to talk about this morning. First, I want to talk about long-term resiliency. In conjunction with that, I want to talk about asset management. Thirdly, I want to talk about long-term capital investments in infrastructure. And lastly, I want to talk about green infrastructure. So let me start off with long-term resiliency. Again, what we looked at for resiliency, we looked at three major components, or four major components, asset management being the fourth one. But post-Sandy, we recognized that we needed to lay out from the DEP side, from the state, we need to start talking about what are the best management practices out there, and where do we need to amend the rules on infrastructure in the state to make sure we've created long-term resiliency. The first area we want to talk about is power resiliency. Both water and water supply and water quality have existing regulations on the books already for backup power. But we recognized after the storm, we needed to clarify the minimum requirements for backup power. We need a presence of sufficient and on-site generators. We need to have extended fuel capabilities for these generators long term. We need to create the storage of backup sources in flood-proof buildings and alternative fuel supplies. We also need to include the storage of fuel for trucks, fleets, and for workers' vehicles to ensure that they're able to get to work, those operations are able to work overall. We're also evaluating the merit of pre-staging bulk fuel around the state. We haven't decided how we're going to do that yet, but we're looking through, we've got several options. But again, do we start using storage facilities, DOT storage facilities around the state as possibilities so that we have more fuel available for these kinds of incidences? The second major area on resiliency overall is floodproofing. Again, what we recognize that while we have a lot of standards in place, we need to probably be more specific on setting those standards and be clearer about what those standards are. We want to improve the construction standards, and we're considering looking at the evaluation of the elevation of pump stations and or the electric systems associated with wastewater collection, treatment, or water supply wells. We're floodproofing treatment systems and pump stations. We're talking about using the use of watertight manhole covers for collection systems within a flood-prone areas. And lastly, we're looking to expand the existence of capacity of water, sewer or stormwater lines when they're replaced. The third major area we're talking about is emergency preparedness. And again, we're trying to lay this out overall within a broader plan. Our regulations require emergency response plans that need to be in place. We've decided we need to clarify what those plans are better, more specifics around those plans, and make sure that the communities and utilities have those plans in place and ready to move for storms such as Superstorm Sandy. The fourth major area, and it's part of the broader discussion that I've laid out over the last 4 years, is asset management. Again, key component, I've continued talking about this as a key component to water infrastructure in this state since I've taken this job. Asset management is the management of the physical components of drinking water and wastewater systems overall. A key component of asset management is looking at and managing the full life cycle of assets. And there are 5 main components of that: performing an inventory and conditions of the assets in someone's system, defining the level of service goals, identifying critical assets, establishing life cycle costs, and developing a long-term funding strategy. Asset management is absolutely critical. Large utilities around the country, primarily more private utilities and public utilities, run that way. We've got to look at it that way for municipal utilities, both water supply, wastewater. And even in some towns, we need to be looking at it from a stormwater point of view. What are we doing from the long-term asset management point of view on it? The next major area I want to talk about is long-term capital investments. Again, to be able to make this work long-term, we can't talk about investments in infrastructure on just an annual basis. We've got to look out 10, 20, 30 years. Investments need to be made over the long haul. We recognize the financial pressures of trying to lay out a plan where we're going out and trying to make large investments in a very short period of time. That's not the way it works. Long-term capital investments mean laying aside capital dollars on an annual basis and continue having a plan of how those assets are built up over a period of time. That's the way it gets done. It's not spend money when the repairs occur, when repairs are needed. You may need to do that, but we don't want to jump from repair to repair project overall. We want to invest long-term over in capital investments. From the state's point of view, we've, in the short run, from Superstorm Sandy and from our work with EIT, we've expanded our financial assistance programs to provide over $800 million worth of for money repairs for infrastructure for the state, for water infrastructure of the state. We've also set up in a very short term $65 million into what we're calling the Statewide Assistance Infrastructure Loan Program, or SAIL program. That allows us to get money out on the street immediately for a lot of smaller projects that need to get started right away, while a lot of the larger projects will work their way through both the process we have set up with DEP, EPA, and EIT. For Sandy, financing programs, $350 million for clean water and drinking water has been set aside. $190 million for clean water, $38 million for drinking water. Again, a key component to that money will be principal forgiveness. About 20% of that money will be principal forgiveness coming from the SRF funding. Finally, the last area I want to talk about, I know it's a big focus that we continue to talk about in this group, is the green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is still new to many to many municipalities. Again, we see blending both the gray infrastructure of building along with green infrastructure. Those two components have to go together long term. For fiscal year 14 and 15, EIT has reserved $32 million to support the implementation of green infrastructure. We're providing principal forgiveness loans up to 50% of allowable projects, both in Barnegat Bay and communities of combined sanitary and stormwater systems. We're requiring the asset management of green infrastructure as part of a long-term control plans for CSO communities. We see this as absolutely critical component for CSOs long-term. Other cities have done it. We've seen what New York has laid out for their plan, and we recognize that green infrastructure can play a key role in addressing some of the very larger issues, especially CSOs long-term. Again, what we're putting out there is updating our best management practices and regulations around green infrastructure. We want to promote better understanding and the use of green infrastructure. We want to update low-impact design and general design maintenance. We want to provide training to other state agencies to promote and permit for stormwater and allow for maintenance and using new technologies. Again, we also see the developing using both the monies that we have from SRF funding to play a key role in leveraging long-term funding within green infrastructure overall. We're very committed to green infrastructure. We see it as a key component of how we're going to make investments in the future. We also see it in a lot of ways as both a way, in a lot of cases, a lower cost way of addressing a lot of the stormwater related issues that we have to address within the state of New Jersey. In closing, I want to recognize that we have long-term plans in place from the state of New Jersey for infrastructure. We're going to continue to come out with continued laying out along those long-term plans. We're also going to be talking about both best practices and new regulations as necessary to address the infrastructure of the state. We believe it's necessary in this post-Sandy era to lay out a long-term game plan of how we're going to continue to rebuild the infrastructure of the state of New Jersey. I want to thank the Clean Water Council for your work and your continued commitment to getting things done and focused on the efforts that we have on clean water. It's absolutely necessary. I need your input. I appreciate your guidance and direction overall, and I appreciate the hearing today so we can get some additional input from some of our top experts in the field. Thank you all very much.
Commissioner Martin, thank you so much for your time. And for those members of the public here, please understand that while the Commissioner goes off to his other responsibilities, he has staff members here, including Michelle Putnam, who will hear everything that you have to say as well as that our speakers have to say, and we will distill into a report for the Department and the Commissioner the results of this hearing.